Welcome everyone to our Horses and Humans Research Foundation Lunch and Learn. I am Dr. Pebbles Turbyville, the CEO, and really horses and humans are about making sure that everyone understands that horses help humans and we have the research behind it, and we're also providing the education too. So this is kind of a series that really Elizabeth came up with, or Dr. Richardson, if you want to be formal, came up with so that we could all kind of connect and just talk about research or what we're working on or different topics. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Elizabeth.
Your timing is perfect. You guys can probably hear my cuckoo clock in the background. It's a little, seems like it always coordinates with right on the nose, multiple chimes. So anyway, glad y'all could make it and join us today. I think this is going to be a fairly popular kind of topic to talk about. I think we all probably have some experience with this or struggle a little bit with how to integrate kind of research findings into our everyday kind of operations in our different farms. So I'm really interested in hearing from you guys about how you've used research up until now, like in what capacities, whether it's through advertising or kind of updates or briefs to different stakeholders. I have a really brief, it's like, I think 10 PowerPoint slides, but I really want this to be pretty conversational. I'm hoping you guys will just feel free to jump in. And thank you, Cheryl, for being here to be able to help with talking or jump in, wherever you see fit in the slides, and also about Science Open too. So let me share. Make sure I get the right one to share. Yes. Okay. You guys should be able to see that. I'll just keep it so you can see all of that. That's fine. Everybody see that okay? All right. So three main things I wanted to make sure that we kind of touch on. And hopefully I'm hitting the mark in this, but again, you might have other things that you're struggling with or challenges that you want to bring to the group to see how we can be a resource for each other and helping each other with navigating this area. So first off, really wanting to identify ways that you can, and there's a lot of different ways that you can incorporate scientific research into your communications, especially if we just think about the different stakeholders that we might be targeting, the level of engagement that we want to have with them. So I think we'll have some conversation around that. How you go about accessing research articles. I know it can be difficult, especially if you're not in academia, to be able to access all of the journals that you might be interested in looking at with all of your spare time. Joking. So a couple of ideas on how to go ahead and target research articles, and then really spending the bulk of our time talking about like the process for how you work on drafting kind of key summaries of different articles that you think might be relevant or important to share with different stakeholders. Okay, so so first off, I'm just curious from you guys, how have you used research so far in your in your own programs to support kind of your efforts? Do you incorporate it when you're considering educational practices for training out volunteers or sidewalkers? Do you use it in promotional materials you might, set up for kind of getting word out about your programming? What have your experiences been like so far with research and communications? And I'm sorry, I can't see everybody, so feel free to just jump in if I don't see a hand or anything up. Anybody want to offer thoughts on how you've used research in the past?
Is it really loud here? I was just gonna add that one way we've used it is to convince the managers who run the horse stuff when I was at a therapeutic riding center to feed differently, and it saved us a bunch of money and was much better for the horses' welfare.
Hmm. Right. I mean, that, you know, when we think about stakeholders, horses are definitely one of the stakeholders we should be considering. A lot of times we think about, you know, research as supporting our clients or families or donors, but the horses are obviously key to everything that we do. So that's a great example. Heather, I see your hand up.
Yeah, we'll be using some of the research that has been provided through this group and through Andrew McLean to change the educational and testing materials for the United States Pony Club. So we're excited about that.
Oh, that's nice. Can you give an example of like something that you're thinking about changing that might be informed by research?
Sure. In much, well, not a specific paper, maybe, although we're looking at the 5 domains model from
Mhm.
horse welfare group, and particularly talking about behavioral interactions and having horses be more like horses, right? Having that
Mhm.
ability within whatever situation across the nation that might look like, which is going to be very different from the east to, say, Arizona. See, somebody's from Cave Creek there, right? Different ways of keeping horses. And yeah, so it's very exciting. We're looking at Pony Club Australia's work as well, certainly.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice to know that we don't always have to be trailblazers in everything we're doing, that
Yes.
we can see what other people have been up to and then creatively think about how to modify based on our particular situation, or as you're talking about, you know, more broadly, depending on whether you're referring to East Coast of the US versus West Coast, for sure. Those are great examples. Thanks. Justin, your hand's up.
Yes, it is. It's so good to see all of you guys again. I know I'm just kind of here with my video off, but I had to come and listen to it. So I know I personally, I use it in a lot of the research in academia. It's where I'm making my way right now. But since coming on and joining HHRF, the equine well-being piece has been incredibly eye-opening for me. It seems like there's a kind of a lot of dogma about the equine well-being, and then there's the what research actually shows us. And you know, we are supposed to be industry leaders, especially without equine well-being, in providing like good, healthy spaces for horses to exist, so they can help us too. So I know for me, like the where I've really looked at research or where I found the most applicable way to use research is in that aspect. A lot of what I learned for well-being was passed down generationally, but that doesn't necessarily mean just because it's been passed down generationally that it's true or supported by the data. So
Mm.
having an open mind and uh, taking it kind of from the experts, what we should be doing, it's been very critical for me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know even with my own experience, every barn kind of does things oftentimes pretty differently. But when you ask out of a, you know, curiosity why they do things the way they do, they're often not really based in anything other than, well, this is why we do, this is how we do it, and that's just the way we've always done it. So, you know, there might be some rhyme or reason to that, but I think it's really nice when you see in the research literature that, you know, it's supported or potentially, you know, conflicts with what's recommended in, you know, kind of modern science. So, yeah. So, I think, you know, we can all agree that there's a lot of different ways that research can help with informing our practices. I also think it is worthwhile to think about how do we translate that research so that the different stakeholders really can understand where we're coming from. And I would like to argue that that helps with strengthening our programs and potentially distinguishes your program from others You know, when you're looking for donors, when you're looking for, you know, contributors to the program. Certainly, if you're thinking about reaching out for grant funding, to be able to say, you know, we are basing kind of these guidelines on science that we have looked at. We've tried kind of piloting this work in our own facility. So using kind of a scientific framework can really help with kind of acquiring some grant support as well. So, okay, moving along. All right. Um, so I wanted to make sure that we did touch on where we find research articles. Not everybody can access every single journal. There are a lot of paywalls that are up. Say, you know, something comes across your feed, a really interesting article you'd like to look at more, but you can only access the abstract. I think HHRF has done a really great job in being able to you know, provide access to some articles. And, you know, I know we've been working on creating kind of infographics that provide brief summaries of articles, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. So there are a few efforts. Cheryl, do you want to talk a little bit about the Science Open effort that HHRF has kind of been, and you played a big role in spearheading that?
Not really. I'm just good at talking about it. It might be a little loud here. I'm at an expo. I just shared the link, but for those of you who have trouble accessing research because it's behind a paywall or you just don't know where to look, we have curated a collection on Science Open of EAS and equine wellbeing articles. Most of them are open access, and if not, there is a way to email the authors and ask for permission. And the idea is like, if the knowledge is more readily accessible, then it's easier for us to use and disseminate in this way. Also, I would like to put a call out. If you find articles in equine wellbeing or EAS that aren't listed on Science Open when you go there, please email them to us and we will make sure that they get posted if we have permission to post them.
Yeah, how many of you had were aware of the Science Open availability through HHRF? Okay, I see maybe a couple of you. So it's kind of, I think, still kind of growing. I don't know exactly when it rolled out. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago that it rolled out. And so it will continue to kind of grow with more articles being updated and included through there. So it's a good place to start. Obviously, Google Scholar provides a kind of pretty easy way to be able to access some articles, not all of them though, but it does get you started. I've had pretty good luck with emailing authors directly to request copies. If, for example, I need something more quickly than I can get it through interlibrary loan at the university that I'm a faculty member at. So that's always another possibility, to email the authors directly and ask. They usually are happy to provide that, and it's good for them because it gets their article out and actually being used and applied. And then for some of you that are, you know, thinking about engaging in research more heavily, I'd certainly encourage you to partner with a university-based researcher. They're going to be able to access all of those articles for you, and potentially, depending on what the project is, whether it's working on a grant, et cetera, they would be able to take some of the writing load too, with being able to review research articles and help with deciphering what we currently know as the state of the scientific literature. So, any other ways that you all have accessed research articles in the past that seem to kind of have worked well for you? I'm looking through to see.
While we're waiting, I just wanted to say that the Science Open collection was really a brainchild or brainstorm of Hetty and HHRF meeting and discussing that we really wanted a place for research collection. And so we got Science Open to be able to do it, but it was the two organizations coming together and problem solving and coming up with a solution. And I do have I want to say curators from HHRF team and the HEDI team that help me add articles. And at the current time, we have 1,051. So it continues to grow. And if you go to the Horses and Humans Research website under Research tab, you'll find that Science Open link. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and I have it in I'll send you the PowerPoint for this. Maybe we can include that along with the transcript, and the link is included in here too, as you see here.
Great.
I actually really, yes, I love the title of curator. That's wonderful. It's very elegant and sophisticated.
Yeah, Justin is a curator.
Excellent. So, all right. So, thinking a little bit more about this idea of explaining science, I think it can be pretty daunting for a lot of people. I still find it sometimes intimidating. It's not something they really teach you in graduate school about how do you effectively translate the research that you've engaged in, that you've spent months, years working on. How do you translate it to kind of a lay audience or general population? Um, and so I think one of the most helpful models that I found for explaining that, I put the link in for his website, is he thinks about, so this is Richard Burks. He proposes writing about science as if it's a journey. And what you're doing is you're trying to think of the best way to get your audience from point A to point B. Now, in that journey, there's obviously a lot of different ways you could potentially get there. There's some that are more direct, and there's some that are more kind of winding. So along the way, what you see here in this little graphic that I included are these little, what he calls, I actually love the term, he calls them like scientific nuggets, right? So along the way, there are these pieces of information that you're asking your readers to understand or engage with. And that's important. It's important kind of pieces of knowledge that you want them to take away from why you're explaining about the research. But on the other hand, he also cautions, because if you take too long in your approach to go from point A to point B in this kind of scientific journey, you're going to have too many kind of scientific nuggets of information along the way, and you're going to lose your audience. So, with that being said, there's a few different ways that you can think about trying to kind of make sure that that journey is pretty efficient and it does what it needs to do. So the first thing is considering kind of your point A, your starting point, meaning who's your target audience? Um, who are you who are you trying to address by reviewing a research article and talking about some of the main findings? It could be that you're trying to address your board with trying to get more resources in a particular area. It could be that you're trying to um, gather information to be able to best support kind of the equine welfare and what their needs are. It could be that you're wanting to educate your volunteers more in a particular thing. So the first thing is considering that point A and what your audience is and what they know initially, so that you're not kind of starting at a place that's too far away from what their existing knowledge is, or is assuming that they know a lot more than what they actually might know. So, and then the next step is considering your point B. So with that, it's really hard to be able to figure out what your end point is going to be if you haven't thought about who your target audience is. So once you know who your target audience is, then you can think about, like, why does this article matter for them? and consider what the kind of key findings are that are most important for them to understand. And that's how your kind of journey from point A to point B kind of starts to unfold. Then along the way, you're going to be adding in. So first off, I mean, what I always start with is the key findings. Why does this matter? What are the most important things that this study learned? And then you can backfill in with what's the background, like why did they decide to do this the way they did? Why is this particularly helpful for this particular consumer group? And then I included in there some writing tips on making sure that you're using plain language. I think we get ourselves into trouble when we try to use bigger words than we really need to use. Scientists are terrible at doing this. Academics are terrible at doing this. But plain language is a good thing. And I think we all can be better about just trying to speak very plainly. It doesn't mean that we're dumbing it down. It means that we're making it kind of palatable and useful for the audiences that we're targeting. And then the last piece that I add in here is the kind of importance of going back once you've done the draft to go back and re-look at it and adjust accordingly. And that's when I would go back to, for example, this diagram of, am I going about this in the most direct way? Am I hitting the mark with the target audience that I'm trying to kind of identify? Is it too windy? Am I dropping too many kind of scientific nuggets in there that I'm potentially going to be losing them? So I hope that understands a little bit about the general kind of the way I think about the journey and how we go from, for example, taking a scientific research article that might be 6 to 8 pages long and figuring out what are the most important things that I want to say about this article, given this particular audience that I want to talk with. I'll stop there for a second and see if there are questions that you all might have or comments on your own experiences.
I'm curious, Elizabeth, if I can butt in a second, like how many people find this like whole concept really daunting and how many find it exciting?
Good question. Heather, is your hand up from before or up again?
It's up again.
Yay, yay. Good, go for it.
This is really fun for me to go through. I spent over 25 years working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, trying to convince people we should protect things like, I don't know, San Francisco garter snake, right? Like, why would you do that? Why is it important? And it was always interesting as the researcher myself, I would want to put in all kinds of scientific language. And then actually we handed it over to somebody else who could take that and make it presentable. And so you did learn when you then reread theirs to make sure it was correct. You started to learn, oh, I could say it like that. Like they just, the animal dies, right? Instead of, the probability of extinction is raised by X amount, right? And so it was a really interesting process to do that. And just so there are places like the different labs, Lawrence Livermore Lab, Los Alamos Lab, that have specific people that do this. So try not to be daunted by it. When you're a huge professional research organization or a government one, you have people who help you do that. And there's a lot to be learned from that. So you can practice like looking at the research article itself and then looking how maybe a professional has brought that into readable words, that people can understand. So yeah, good on you.
I think that's a great point. It's also like showing ourselves a little bit of grace about doing this. It does not come naturally. And I find that most people, including myself, are like, what the heck? Why can't I do this? Like I'm actually trying to make it easier, not ramp it up, but it's it's
Yeah.
challenging. And you're right, there are marketing folks that this is what they're trained to do, and this is their entire job. So, that
And
being said, I think we all can be better about figuring out how to kind of decipher a little bit more and have those sort of, spots where we can, it's almost like having a conversation at the dinner table about the work that you're doing, being able to explain it in that kind of easy conversational way.
yeah, we used to call it the 2-minute elevator speech,
Yes,
right? If we needed
exactly.
to convince somebody why what we were doing was important, we needed to have it pretty succinct. And I
Yeah.
would recommend having somebody review it that is interested in the same subject, and then have somebody review it, a friend of yours who has no particular interest in it, and see if it works for them. That's a
That's a
really
great
easy
idea.
way to find out if you're on track or not.
That's a great idea. It's definitely covering two important bases by doing that when you ask both of those people to look at it. I've also heard seen recommendations for like write it as if you were trying to explain it to your grandmother, as another way to think about it. Somebody that might be interested a little bit in what you're doing, but it's not their area of expertise. They, don't have any clear passion for it, but you're working to try to engage them.
And I love how you suggested figuring out your audience first, because you will find that you will write it differently depending on the audience, right? So don't feel
Absolutely.
like you have to do it once and it should make sense to everybody. It will need to be rewritten for a board of directors versus a trainer versus it's going to be different and look different for a different reason.
That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Heather. Lisa, how about you? Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I probably have to leave this meeting, so I wanted to kind of chime in first because I just love all the points that you're making. I do peer review, and it's incredibly frustrating to receive research that is poorly written up so that it's just convoluted and unnecessarily complicated. And I'm not even I'm a layperson as far as research goes, so I'm certainly not versed in statistics or anything like that. So there's usually whole sections of these manuscripts that go over my head. But I can even find the mistakes in the statistics, believe it or not, in how sometimes it's just grammar and punctuation. It's as basic as, we were taught as kids that, grammar and punctuation is important. You can't believe how important it is when you're presenting research, because just to separate things apart when you're making a list so that lists don't get conjoined where they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And every time I do this, I end up actually not just being a reviewer, but I end up being a copy editor, simply because some of these journals need that, or these authors need that. But when I read the papers, I just ask myself, did this author reread what they wrote after they finished the paper? And a lot of times sometimes there are words missing from a sentence, or and there's spelling errors and just all kinds of things that makes me wonder, did they really review this? Did they read this again? And even there are times when there's flaws in the methodology that I'm pointing out that can't be fixed because the research has already been conducted. However, it's still worth writing the paper to help all the people that are coming up behind you to understand where your research went wrong. And so there's nothing wrong with acknowledging, hey, this went wrong, this went wrong, this is what didn't work, and this is what we'd like to fix next time. And I think that when that is done, it is a contribution to the field. Even if you can say, okay, this wasn't a valid research study, you're contributing to the field by explaining why it isn't valid, why it didn't work. So I just think that I love everything that you're pointing out, and I wish so much that that people would follow this. Now, I even get research papers that are about equine assisted activities that are not written by people in the field. And that gets really complicated because they don't know the language to use and
Right.
whatever. But it can be errors like introducing an acronym and then somehow getting it wrong further down the paper. Do you know what I'm saying? And there's enough, especially if you're doing a statistical analysis, there's enough jargon.
Right.
The
Stuff happening.
less you can jargon up your paper, the better it is.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm just piggybacking on everything that you say because it's
Yeah.
just so very, it's very frustrating as a reviewer when someone has not, and I love the idea of having both someone who knows the material and who doesn't know the material. I mean, as an example, I mean, I may know equine assisted activities, but I do not know research at all. And I can still, statistically, I can still figure out the errors in how the statistics are being presented or what's necessary or unnecessary. How do you
Right.
pare
Right.
down your,
Siphon off. Exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
yes,
I
yes.
think you raised a lot of really important points, and we have to. I say this to my graduate students all the time too, that it's hard for me to evaluate a paper that is bogged down in just all sorts of errors, grammatical errors, spelling error, because it makes me question everything else, and I'm also not getting to the main points of like the actual arguments that are being said, and you don't want your readers that you're trying to share this information with to start questioning your ability to be able to, because they start to question everything then. you know if this person can't even pull together a clean kind of write up that doesn't have a lot of errors in it, then I don't know, do I trust them with providing funding support? They start to make maybe some erroneous kind of misconceptions, but it's something that is within our control, that we can catch all of those things and kind of streamline and make sure that we're catching all of the errors ahead of time for sure. And I think the other point you raised too, of making sure that you're really kind of separating out what's essential for a brief summary and what is really not needed and could be included in something that's more complex. So I appreciate your comments, Lisa. I have a couple of examples to show you too that I think get a little bit at this, which is, knowing your target audience, how much information do you actually share, how condensed do you make it? So let me show you these really quick, and then we'll have a little bit more time to talk. This one I think is maybe a little bit less relevant. I included it just so people could see. It's not related to equine assisted services at all, but I do think, a lot of times people say, well, you just need to make it shorter. That's not true necessarily. I mean, it depends on the target audience, but you'll see with this original example here, that one is loaded with jargon. And the more I read it, the more I'm like, yeah, I think I can get it, but I'm still not quite sure exactly why this is so important that I need to know. And the simplified version, you'll see, isn't shorter, but it's a lot easier to follow. It doesn't have the jargon included in it. So yes, shorter might be okay, but it's also all right just to make sure to target simplifying the language. And again, with this example, I think it's very clear that the authors, when they wrote it, were very intentional about who the target audience was and what the important things were that they wanted them to know about. Um, I have, so there's two examples to show you really quick. Of these are some of the research roundups that the education committee has pulled together. And so what this one does is it offers a graphic as a with some images. So immediately it's a little bit more attention grabbing than you might find in kind of a longer paragraph. It organizes the information into kind of very small, palatable sections. So when we think about those scientific nuggets, they are kind of broken up here for readers to easily see. If they want more information, they can, go to the official research article, which is available through the HHRF website. So I thought the visual images in combination with the kind of truncating of information was a really helpful way to explain this information in this particular one. And then this one is a part A and a part B. So this is a write-up that Kathleen did for HHRF of an article that was looking at behavioral costs of care and kind of changes in maintenance behavior and how those impacted equine behavior. And what you'll see is it's longer. It serves the purpose of, so what the intent of this research roundup is to give us kind of in the field enough information that we can kind of, instead of reading the full article, we can get enough information out of this so we have a pretty good sense of what they found. So it's assuming that there's a pretty decent amount of knowledge already about the field of equine assisted services, et cetera. But what you can see is you're potentially going to lose some people in reading this because it's fairly long. And it might presume a level of knowledge that some other kind of stakeholders don't necessarily have, right? So then I played around with, humor me for a second. I played around with, well, what if I took this and I wanted to summarize in 3 to 4 sentences this information to really make it that much shorter, potentially impactful to catch people that don't have a lot of time to read. And I threw into the mix, I used ChatGPT to create it. Now, I have very mixed feelings about ChatGPT as an educator in higher ed. I have concerns for sure, but I also don't want to bury my head in the sand. And I do acknowledge that if used well and clearly, it can offer some, I think, time-saving efforts when we're reading over an article. So this is what it gave me when you took the longer version that Kathleen had written up, and I asked for 3 to 4 sentences. Now, I'm curious what you guys think about this. Like when I read it, it actually, sometimes when you read ChatGPT stuff, you can tell, ooh, that is just, it's not good. But for this, I actually think it did a pretty decent job of a quick summary. Now, so I'm curious about what you guys think about use of ChatGPT, whether it did a good job of summarizing the content here in an understandable way. Thoughts? I see a thumbs up from a couple of you.
Yeah, I would say it did a nice job of removing jargon. And
Mhm.
what maybe it didn't do was just throwing it all in a single paragraph. So maybe just a little bit more in terms of the cosmetic aspect to make it even more understandable.
Breaking it up into kind of smaller pieces, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think it has to do with like knowing your target audience too. So if I'm somebody that has some information about the field, I don't necessarily care about the study methods per se. I just want to know overview of what they found. I think this can do that. But I personally would like to know a little bit more about, well, how did they go about doing that? That means you have to add more information in though, and it makes it longer. So again, there's a place for both. But we just, have to know who we're targeting with that. Heather, you had your hand up.
Yeah, actually, when I look at this and read it, it seems like kind of a typical chat GPT.
Yeah.
The research, did the research look at what happened during the therapy sessions or how the therapy sessions affected eating, moving, and resting before, during, and after the sessions. So it's more than just what happened during the sessions.
Yeah.
So it could say this study looked at how horses behave, during, before, and after equine assisted therapy. Otherwise, it's indicating to the reader that there's only one aspect that was looked at, and it doesn't talk until the next sentence about the others that were looked at. So
Mhm.
if I were looking at this, I would just move the second sentence up and integrate it into the first one.
That's a good point. Right, right. It makes it a
And-
little bit clearer, perhaps, on kind of what, what the kind of methods were that they were trying to kind of implement. So yeah, that's a good
all.
point. And you're right. I mean, I think as time progresses, ChatGPT is getting smarter at figuring out how to write things, but I don't think we're at a place, nor should we probably ever just take in entirety what we get from something like a chat GPT and incorporate it wholly. I think we're still the owners of kind of how we're distributing that information and knowledge, and we need to be careful with making sure that it is as clear as possible. I think this is shorter than what Kathleen wrote in the earlier slide, but maybe aside from it being shorter, it's not necessarily clearer to me, and it's missing some of that kind of important methodological stuff that I find particularly helpful. So, but with that being said, it's a tool that we do have access to that could be useful. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, Heather.
Oh, well, I was thinking it also depends on the audience. Do people really want to know about a study? Right? Because I think that's a big question. If you were talking to a group of people, say at a community horse group, I would actually start with something like eating, moving, and resting are critical to horses' welfare, right? So this
Exactly.
study, right? So you start with the most important thing first. That would get people's
Right.
attention. They're horse people. They understand that. Now, here's why we did the study, because we had a question about whether equine assisted therapy would interrupt that. And
That's
here's
right.
the reason. So I think that the lead sentence depends a lot on your audience.
Yes. Yeah, and
Yeah.
what your goal is for sharing the knowledge to begin with. I mean, what did Pebble say at the start with Science Direct has over what
We have
1,300
over
articles.
1,051 articles.
Right.
and-
So like
and
why choose this particular article to write about, And I think like Cheryl, you gave the example early on too of, you know, uh, and a particular article that really was useful in helping the barn to understand feeding patterns. That's where you lead. That's the start. You got to catch them right away, and then provide the helpful information that's going to kind of support why you're sharing that information.
I always say I don't like so much cite the research studies at first. I'll be like, it literally says in research. I find myself saying that all the time. And then the conversation starts. So I think you're right. Like it's not always like this specific study or this researcher, right? It's like it's out there. And then when you need to, you can go and retrieve it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
But the conversationality, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
And it's never worth losing the conversationality part of it in order to squeeze in more like scientific nuggets of content too. There's a place for those, right? I mean, if they want the longer version, if they want the actual article, yes. But I think the goal of a lot of what we're talking about now and in this particular webinar is really trying to focus on the conversationality of it and realize that that can take a lot of different forms, shorter, longer, depending on the audience you're targeting, the content that you're wanting to share. So, and then excellent advice that you guys offered too of get other people to read it. Those in the field and those out of the field. What do they take away from it? Do they find it useful? Do they, what nugget do they walk away with? So, any other thoughts as we're running out of time. Is everybody mostly done with their lunch? Any other thoughts as we kind of wrap up for today?
I had one more little thought. I've been a
Yeah.
writing tutor and I'm a technical writer, and I find that audience is key. But I try to teach, give one nugget with a number in your elevator speech. So if we're doing this hard factual research, the scientific, why are we omitting a number? Give someone what statistic in your research made you go, wow. Use that number to make people go, wow, and care about what you're talking about.
That's a great point. And don't overwhelm with numbers, not too many numbers, but what's one thing that really stands out to you? Yeah, I think that's excellent because the human brain can remember a number. They're going to walk away with a kind of tidbit of information, and it could be that for sure. So that's an excellent point. Thank you, Rachel. So
I just
awesome.
wanted to add, I don't know if it was Lisa or Heather, who talked about the research that we don't talk about because it wasn't published and it went wrong. And I think that's very valuable. And that was one of the projects that Hetty and HHRF thought about too. The Science Open with a collection of articles was really kind of step one. We really wanted to create something bigger, that we could have like a chat room and discuss research that didn't go well, because everybody's all about publish or perish. But why, if I failed at something, it's not really a failure. I'm just learning not to do it this way, and I need to share it so somebody else doesn't do the same thing. Right. And then the other piece was that we had hoped to kind of create a chat room where it was like a virtual bulletin board by saying, hey, I'm working on this right now. Or is anybody else working on this, or anybody wants to collaborate on this topic? So I think there's, so that we could create that communication between all the researchers. Anyway, that's,
yeah, I think those are great ideas. And you're right, there's definitely a bias towards kind of or against non-significant findings, or studies that really had pretty significant limitations. They're so much less likely to get published or to even be written up for trying to publish them. But yet I always look at them as like it's still a stepping stone to allow me to move on to the next thing where I'm learning from these other these other kind of missteps or miscalculations. It's not necessarily investigator error all the time. Sometimes it's literally just you're learning your way through a different line of work that you're doing. So I love the idea of creating spaces for people to be able to share, in a supportive environment. This really just didn't go well, and let's try to kind of help each other out. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here and kind of keeping the conversation going about how we kind of disseminate research in various ways. I'm happy to continue the conversation if anyone wants to at any point, and we'll keep up with having lunch and learns in this topic area, as well as a range of topics based on comments that we hear from you guys. So thank you for being here. I know, Pebbles, you're going to put the transcript up. Is that right?
Yes, hopefully AI worked and got it all. We've had some issues with it, and hopefully the recording works, so I can also put that up too.
Perfect. And I have the PowerPoint that I'll send to you as well.
Yeah. So, and if any of you have any questions or ideas about Lunch and Learn or other topics or things that you would like to see HHRF do, please let us know.
Okay. And Catherine, you had your hand up real quick.
Thanks, Elizabeth. My question really is, thank you everyone. I find this a lovely environment. I'm a qualified accredited coach here in Ireland, and I very much like to bring equine assisted coaching into my coaching work. But I haven't had any luck here. So I'm just wondering if anybody that's on with us, or even if any of you would know about any research that I could perhaps read, even just to find out, you know. And then, of course, on the back of that then is, because there isn't a precedent here at present, the big worry would be in insurance. You know, I say if I were to do it here at home, because horses are coming into it, I find it very frustrating trying to speak with insurance companies. They just, you're either, oh, forget about it, or everybody must wear riding hats. But I mean, but no, there's nobody getting on a horse, you know, and it's all or nothing. So I'm hoping that's not your experience and someone can help me out.
Does anybody have so I hear two things. One is
Yeah.
the insurance related
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
And then the other is like, where do you start with looking at research? And I would say starting with the Science Open link. In there you can search for different articles that might be of interest to you.
Okay.
You might try looking to see, because there are groups doing work in the broader kind of UK region that might be particularly useful for you. And then what do others have suggestions or thoughts on kind of insurance related issues?
I think Graham reached out to her in the
Yes.
chat. So if
Okay.
you want to look at the chat as a reference.
The chat's been very busy.
Yes, it's very busy.
So, okay. All right. So thank you, Graham, for reaching out. I think that would be really helpful for
And
Catherine.
Catherine,
to
if
share.
you want to share your email, you don't have to, but you know, if I find some things, I can definitely send them your way as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Good. That's what we're about, is trying to forge some connections. So that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question, Catherine. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And reach out to Hetty too,
Yeah.
as well. So, all right.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and appreciate Elizabeth here showing us the way and being the leader, and talking about how we can all work together and kind of clarify the research thing, but also make it exciting and fun. So
Yeah,
everyone have a good day.
exactly. Thank you guys for all of your conversation too. Appreciate it. Have a good one.